Okay, so picture this. A figure who helped build PayPal, like really from the inside, then founded a company, sold it for over $1 billion, and now he's advising the White House. Oh, and he might be sitting on a fortune somewhere between, what, $250 million and maybe $2 billion. Nobody seems quite sure. It makes you wonder, right? What kind of mind operates like that, stays relatively quiet, but is so deeply involved in shaping tech, shaping policy? Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you send us and really dig in to pull out the key insights. Today, we are diving deep into David Sacks, a name maybe not everyone knows, but whose influence is, well, undeniable, even if he's not always in the spotlight. I mean, the resume is pretty staggering. Former COO of PayPal, founder of Yammer, sold to Microsoft, $1.2 billion, co-founder of Craft Ventures, managing over $3.3 billion. And now, this is the big one, the White House's AI and Crypto Czar, and chair of PCS, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. And yeah, that huge question mark over his actual net worth, that's fascinating all by itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And based on this stack of sources, our mission here is really to try and get inside his head. How does David Sacks think? How does he navigate these really complex worlds, tech, finance, now politics? What does his kind of quiet but incredibly powerful rise tell us about money, influence, and maybe strategic patience in today's world? That's a fascinating study, really, in making a massive impact without necessarily seeking the limelight.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this. So David Sacks, maybe not a household name like, say, Musk or Thiel, but in the valley, his shadow is long. At PayPal, he wasn't just there. He was the first product lead, later COO. He was apparently key in pivoting them away from Palm Pilots, remember those, towards the web.
Right, a critical shift.
Totally. He basically set up a lot of the early operations, product, sales, marketing, customer service, fraud, even HR. So by the time PayPal went public in 2002, becoming part of that, legendary PayPal mafia.
The group that spawned so many other huge companies.
Exactly. Sacks had already sort of quietly established himself as this strategic core.
And he didn't just cash out and disappear. He waited, watched the landscape after PayPal. Then, 2008, he comes out with Yammer, business social network. What was really smart there, I think, was taking those viral growth tricks from consumer tech and applying them to the enterprise space. He got the workplace networks matter too.
Right.
And it worked. 4 years. Over 8 million users, 60 million in revenue, 500 employees, boom.
And then Microsoft acquisition.
Then Microsoft, 1.2 billion. Cash. I mean, that sauce exit really cemented his reputation, not just as a builder, but as a strategist who could see an angle.
So it's like he was engineering virality, but inside corporate walls. That kind of thinking? Did that carry straight over into venture capital? Because after building and selling...
Turned into funding.
Right. He co-founds Craft Ventures in, late 2017 with Bill Lee, and they took off pretty fast. Raised $350 million for the first fund, then $500 million in 2019, and then 2 more funds in 2023. Craft Ventures, the 5 for $712 million, Growth 2.6 for $608 million.
Which brings their total assets under management now to around, $3.3 billion. It's significant.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Craft really turned that earlier insight into an operating system for investing. As a VC, Sacks wasn't just throwing money at ideas. He was, you could say engineering ecosystems. His approach is actually pretty unflashy for Silicon Valley, very focused on size fundamentals.
Like what specifically?
Things like unit economics, making sure each customer actually makes you money over time, aggressively tackling customer churn, keeping clients. While maybe others were chasing, the next big speculative thing, he was doubling down on businesses with steady recurring revenue. And tracking it all super closely with detailed analytics like cohort retention curves, seeing how long different groups of customers actually stick around.
That's a really key difference, isn't it? He's not just betting, he's actively building resilience into these companies, and maybe that methodical style. Maybe that's why his own wealth is so hard to pin down. Like we said, $250 million, $2 billion. That range is huge. It's not just a side note, it feels central to how he operates. His wealth isn't tied to a public stock ticker you can just look up.
Precisely. That opacity gives him leverage. That's exactly it. His money, just like his influence, it moves quietly. It's not just that it's hard to track, it's that the opaqueness itself is a tool. It gives him leverage. Think about it. Unlike public figures whose every stock trade is analyzed, Sacks can make these quieter, maybe longer-term bets, investing before things hit the mainstream.
Right, it's strategic.
It's definitely strategic. As a general partner at a multi-billion-dollar fund, he's right at that intersection of capital and innovation. He sees deals, private deals, often way before the public does. And that gives him leverage, and I just don't see. He's not just investing, sometimes he's shaping outcomes. installing CEOs, restructuring teams, defining product strategy.
So he's not just riding the wave.
He's engineering the tide. That's a good way to put it.
And this financial ambiguity, it's part of the method. It frees him from, the quarterly earnings pressure that public figures face, gives him a different kind of long-term view. It also feeds into his timing, right? He seems to show up early, exit smartly, reinvest carefully. Doesn't seem like the type to just jump on volatile trends or chase hype.
No, definitely not.
He plays the long game, build slow, scale deliberately, diversify not just money, but social capital too.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the real sign of wealth now. Not the headlines, but the quiet buildup of asymmetric power. The kind that doesn't need constant validation, the kind that just grows in silence.
And that approach really is key to understanding his whole journey. It wasn't about viral fame or, being obsessed over by the media. It was precise, calculated, almost surgical. After PayPal, he didn't immediately try to cash in on the name. He waited, watched, then Yammer. And selling it to Microsoft wasn't just a payday. It was proof. Proof he could see things others didn't, build things others wouldn't.
And Craft Ventures then scaled that insight.
Right, turn that insight into infrastructure for funding other companies built the same way.
But then came the twist, right, the move into politics. Early 2025, the guy who built back-end systems and startups is suddenly tapped to shape frontline policy. Former President Trump appoints him AI and Crypto Czar and chair of PCST.
Mm-hmm.
At first, maybe it sounded a bit symbolic, ceremonial.
Yeah, you might think that.
But pretty quickly, Sachs starts pushing actual directives, calling for competitive neutrality in AI, criticizing government overreach in crypto, pushing this foundational free truth idea for new tech. His podcast persona, that sharp voice on the All In podcast, suddenly had an institutional echo. The guy who once fought bureaucracy from the outside was now, kind of ironically, steering it from the inside.
It's really easy to underestimate him because he doesn't scream for attention. Yeah. But that might be why he's so effective. He's not playing for applause. He seems to be playing for control, the kind of control that can rewire industries, and now maybe even influence national policy.
Yeah, and he's never shied away from controversy, has he? Some might even say he uses it strategically. When he became AI and Crypto Czar, critics probably expected, a figurehead. Right. Instead, they got a technologist who wasn't afraid to challenge things. While many regulators were focused on caution, control, maybe even fear around AI, Sachs took a very different line.
A contrarian stance, definitely.
He warned against AI panic, even compared it to, moral panics over video games or social media in the past. Those are bold positions. What are the potential downsides or counter-arguments people raise to that kind of thinking, especially the AI as neutral amplifier idea?
Well, for Sachs, the argument goes, the real danger wasn't AI becoming Skynet. It was that overregulation would kill innovation before it could even get going. He argued the existential threats making headlines were, frankly, a distraction. The real crises, he'd say, are already here. Teen mental health, censorship, monopolies on computing power. So he framed AI not as some enemy to be contained, but as a tool, a neutral amplifier. It could reflect our problems or accelerate progress. What mattered, in his view, wasn't the tech itself, but who controls it and what rules they play by.
And he applied that same logic to crypto, didn't he? He publicly criticized the U.S. government for auctioning seized Bitcoin.
Yeah, saying taxpayers lost billions because they sold too early instead of holding it like a strategic asset.
Right. Advocating for crypto not as a threat, but as infrastructure. Essential infrastructure for the future, like railroads were back in the day. These stances, naturally, got both cheers and boos. Traditional policy folks maybe saw him as reckless. Tech people saw a voice of clarity.
And that might be the real genius behind it. Sachs doesn't seem to argue for finding a middle ground. He argues for symmetry. He's not just trying to disrupt institutions. He's trying to reprogram how they fundamentally think about these technologies. His whole approach seems designed to shift the Overton window, that range of what's considered acceptable public policy, to make ideas that once seemed radical feel more normal, to basically pull the future forward faster.
So if you look at the whole picture, there's this deeper pattern, right? It goes beyond just startups or politics or making money. It's the pattern of someone playing for legacy, not just the moment. While everyone else seems to be scrambling for visibility, Sachs is focused on leverage. He doesn't lead with charisma necessarily or brand. He leads with architecture, building systems designed to outlast him, finding those pressure points where a small push creates big waves.
And what's really striking is why his story feels so hard to grasp sometimes. His fortune, as we said, isn't just financial, it's informational. It's relational. It's institutional. His wealth, his influence, it's diversified across these key networks. The PayPal Mafia connections, the platform of the All In podcast, the deal flow at Craft Ventures, and now, increasingly, these policy circles in D.C.
So it's not that he disappears.
No, it's that he embeds himself.
Yeah.
Quietly,
Yeah.
permanently. Almost like code running in the background infrastructure of the digital world.
And maybe that's the real secret sauce. Sachs doesn't need to be everywhere physically because his thinking kind of is. You see it reflected in how B2B founders using Craft's playbooks scale their companies.
Right.
You hear echoes of it in Washington debates about AI regulation. It filters through those late-night all-in discussions where policy ideas get hashed out, sometimes before they're even official proposals. He's not just playing the game, he seems to be trying to redesign the whole board.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it suggests the future isn't always shaped by the loudest person in the room or the flashiest IPO or the tweet that goes viral. Sometimes, maybe often, it's built quietly by someone who's mastered operated from just outside the direct spotlight, even while their influence reaches into, well, almost every corner of modern power.
Despite all the contrarian moves in this quiet ascent, there seems to be one guiding principle for David Sachs: playing the long game, always. Whether it was staying more behind the scenes at PayPal while others chased the spotlight, or patiently building Yammer without huge hype until that massive exit, he consistently seems to choose delayed gratification over quick wins.
Even his timing in politics fits that pattern, doesn't it? He didn't dive into policy debates in his 30s or 40s. He waited until he had the capital, the credibility, the clarity of his own views. Then he entered the arena when the stakes felt really high.
Yeah.
AI, crypto, digital sovereignty. By that point, he wasn't coming in to just audition for influence. He was positioned to actually exert it.
And you see the same thing in his investing, right? Craft Ventures isn't just chasing unicorns for the headlines. It seems like they're trying to engineer them through that intense focus on fundamentals, founder psychology, making businesses durable for the long haul.
Exactly. He avoids bubbles, not because he's scared, but because he seems to understand that real, lasting power comes from resilience, not just hype, from systems, not temporary spikes.
Yeah.
And when things go wrong, because they always do eventually, right? Sachs doesn't seem to panic. He repositions, whether it was dealing with the fallout of Zenefits way back, or shifting Craft's strategy after COVID, or challenging political norms now. He tends to respond not with noise, but with frameworks, with structure, with signal amidst the noise.
That's not luck, is it? And it's not just charisma. It feels more like intellectual endurance, strategic patience, like a deep belief that lasting empires aren't built by dominating the news cycle week after week. They're built by quietly shaping the foundations underneath it all. David Sachs doesn't just ride out cycles. He seems to kind of orbit above them.
Okay, so let's recap the core lesson here from David Sachs's story. It really isn't defined by spectacle, right, or these big viral moments. It's more like a quiet, steady, methodical current of influence.
Yeah, understated power.
Exactly. True power often is silent, built over decades. Through insight, strategic positioning. He didn't seem to chase validation. He built leverage, positioned himself way before trends hit. Then, when the world finally looks over, he's already there, helping chart the course.
And what's really interesting is that hidden architecture of influence you mentioned. It defines Sachs. His fortune isn't just dollars and cents, it's informational capital, relational capital, institutional capital.
Yep.
His wealth, his power, it's spread across these crucial networks: the PayPal Mafia legacy, the All In podcast platform, Craft Ventures portfolio, and now, more and more, these policy circles.
He embeds himself. He embeds himself quietly, permanently. Almost like code, in the background infrastructure of the digital world. Which means his way of thinking ends up influencing B2B founders via Craft. It echoes in DC debates on AI. It filters through those podcast discussions that policymakers might actually listen to.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? I guess the takeaway isn't necessarily go be David Sachs. That's not replicable. But it's maybe about understanding the blueprint he represents, that long game strategy, building resilience over hype, focusing on systems, not just momentary spikes, recognizing that huge impact can, and often does, happen away from all the noise.
Which leads to, I think, a really important question for everyone listening. In this world that's so obsessed with speed and visibility and just constant noise, are you chasing the headlines in your own life, in your own work?
Right.
Or are you maybe, quietly, trying to shape the foundations that might actually outlast the current trends? It makes you think, how are you playing your own long game?
Yeah. If this deep dive gave you something a a bit deeper to chew on beyond just the money, beyond the power dynamics. And maybe take a second, reflect on how you're playing your long game. Are you chasing noise? Or are you trying to build real leverage? If you found some value here, maybe share this with someone who still thinks that being quiet means you're not strong. Because the quiet minds, well, they always seem to find each other eventually.